Happy to be here. Thank you.
Can you tell us a bit about Saga, what you can tell?
Yeah, just a bit, because I'm really here to speak about blockchain and impact more than about Saga. Saga is a project that we've started 2 years ago, and is designed to provide the world with a global currency, one that is not reliant on any single nation state. And on the other end, one that tackles many of the concerns. Any innovation brings solutions and then creates the next set of problems, right? So when Bitcoin was introduced, several challenges were becoming and are becoming increasingly evident. One in relation with volatility. If we want to propose new currencies, they need to be relatively stable. The second one in regards to compliance, all the concerns, the legitimate concerns by policymakers in regards to AML and KYC, anti-money laundering, know your customer procedures. And the third one, which is the most important, but I won't go down this rabbit hole now, is in relation with governance, with how to effectively take decision while remaining as decentralized as possible. And we've launched just a week ago.
Congratulations, first
Thank
of all. We'll get to that eventually in this talk. But first of all, about you, is it true that you are a former jazz musician?
Yeah, up until 12 years ago, I was happily playing jazz in Paris. Coming back to Israel, I realized that if I wanted to make a living out of music, I would probably end up not making the music I want, nor the living I want. And so I crossed to the dark side of the Israeli startup industry. And I was ready to leave everything 2 years ago, feeling that I've been doing more of the same, planning to go back to the academia, not for music this time, but for political science. And as a farewell gift to a VC I've been the co-founder of, I said I'll take an analyst and investigate this blockchain thing. And the outcome should have been an investment thesis. The outcome is that 2 years later, Saga is the result. And I think I'm here for the next 20 years, at least, not feeling any lack of intellectual stimulus anymore.
But why blockchain?
So I'll try to convince you that blockchain is not a technological revolution, or that the technological element of it is the least important. I mean, how many in this room know who invented the chip printing machine by name? The ones that are able to let us print newspapers, that change our communication, that are responsible to some extent.
There is someone out in the back.
There is one? Not the cheap one. The one that is responsible for the nation state, the central bank, for the fact that we can communicate no longer in our villages, we can create identities together, and then we need all those entities to regulate them, and then we need laws and bills, etc. We don't remember the technician that invented the machine. We remember much more the Montesquieus of the world, the Keyneses of the world, the one that reacted to policy, with policy, to technological innovation. I think this is just the same. What is really fascinating about blockchain is that it is a new way to build contracts. And I'm here in a law firm building, so I'm asking not to be held liable for my definition of a contract. But if you would define a contract as an exchange of power or value between two or more people, according to a logic that can be denoted, then pretty much everything in our life is a contract. Maybe in your life, that's not the case, and that might be the part of the problem, right? If I'm asking my neighbor to borrow a glass of sugar, it's not a contract. It doesn't have a logic. If she's kind, she'll give it to me. If she's not, then she wouldn't. If I'm responsible, I would bring her back her sugar. Maybe in some etiquettes I'm not even supposed to. That's not a contract. That's a kind agreement. But when we look at the state, money, insurance, Facebook, Google, they're all contracts. They're all contracts because they are exchanging value between people according to a denoted logic that can be enforced. And these are all contracts that have two things in common. One is that they're a result of the nation-state concept and principle, which is the first time in the world where we could imagine that the enforcer of the contract needs to be impartial. So that it doesn't matter where we come from, which casta, how much money do we have. There is a set of rules, and we need to abide by those rules. And I think that this notion of impartiality in contracts is now extended to something that is much more scalable and can be in existence in places where you don't have any central government.
So why is it so important right now?
So let me give you two examples. The first one is when the governor is biased, the governor of the contract, and the second one is when you don't have a governor for the contract. And I'll show how blockchain can be a solution to those two. So when it comes to insurance, we don't have a contract with the insurance company. We have a contract amongst ourselves, right? We're taking a potential damage, we're quantifying it, and then we contribute to a common treasury so that we can spread our damage if it happens to us. But it's a complicated contract, exchanging a lot of value between many people according to a very complicated logic. And so we called the insurance company and said, could you please be our governor? The issue is that the insurance company is not an impartial governor, because the target of the parties of the contract is to pay the lowest prime and to get as much of the damage reimbursed, right? The incentive, and I'm not making any claim as to the legitimacy of the insurance company, this is the way it is set up. The incentive of the insurance company is for us to pay the highest contribution and to get the lowest coverage, right? Which means that you have a partial governor, a governor that is a part of the contract. And now let's imagine it with blockchain. And we have a set, each of us is a node on the blockchain, and there is no central governor. There is this protocol that Eyal described earlier. Something very similar. How many of you are familiar with Lemonade? Okay, so Lemonade is trying to do the same without a blockchain. It is based on the fact that Lemonade is acting like a pool, but it's not a protocol. It's still at the discretion of the Lemonade company.
Here, you will get your money if you ask.
The contract, in blockchain, the contract would be between ourselves.
No, in Lemonade, I understand.
Yeah, in Lemonade, they're saying we are transparently managing the pool, and if the pool got more money in contribution by the end of the years, then we'll give it back to you. In blockchain, we don't have to trust anyone to do that. That's the way the protocol would be constructed. The second example is of a scope that doesn't exist. So if you're a citizen in, let's say, the UK, we can definitely then extrapolate it to the developing world, where it would be even more flagrant. But let's say the citizen of the UK, quite a stable country, fully developed, but Brexiting. And from the announcement of the Brexit, the pound has lost about 25% of its value. Now, when you interact within the British economy, that's fine. The British economy responds to the same Brexit decision. But when you go and buy on Amazon, and your pound is worth 25% less, the prices on Amazon have very low consideration for Her Majesty's Parliament. Which means that we're a part of this ever-growing global ecosystem, of this ever-growing global economy. And the issue is that we don't have a global state, a global central bank, a global federation, a Star Trek-like. It seems in many cases that we're going the other way around, right? Every rock and every goat in Europe wants to become its own country. So we're probably not even closer to getting global. And here we have a technology that allows us to create a monetary logic, an agreement between the citizens of the world, even in the lack of a government, even in the lack of a central bank to regulate it, simply because we can create a decentralized protocol, a decentralized logic. And I think that this is, these two use cases where the governance is not good enough, or where the governance simply doesn't exist, it allows us to create a set of solutions that are way beyond the technology. They are about creating new social contracts.
But are you talking about a stable coin, worldwide stable coin? That will be the solution?
That is the solution to the problem that I described. But we can take many other problems, right? If we look at education, I think it is increasingly clear that the societies within nation states are enjoying less and less common ground, right? In our country, we are in the third elections in less than 1 year. We are having more and more difficulties agreeing with each other. And partially, it is because we can communicate with people outside of our nation state. We're no longer consuming news from Walter Cronkite or Chaim Yavin in the evening or the BBC News. We are constantly communicating with people from all across the world, and we are bound to find people that have similar values to us, a much greater similarity in values than the neighbor across the street. But we're still bound from a governance perspective, we're still bound by the nation state as a sort of monolith. If we want to educate our children, we pay taxes to the national education scheme. And now when it comes to the services that are cyber services, that are virtual, and a lot of education can become such, we can now envisage the ability to create a global, not global in the sense of Esperanto, right? It's not imagine all the people, etc. Still, many aspects are national, they're becoming even more national, but on some levels, we can imagine global solutions between people that actually agree with each other and are deciding to create an economy together based on shared values. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but the word value, I've made a hobby of checking it in every language. I'm yet to find a language where it doesn't work. The word value and values coincide quite miraculously, right? Because the definition of value, the definition of the value of our currency is the definition of how is our system of values measured versus other systems of values, right? And the idea that we cannot create network of values that actually have value by token, by currency, based on bigger common ground, I think is revolutionary.
It's very revolutionary, it's even utopian in a way, because you have people in office, in government, big tech that controls our data and our lives, almost everything that we do. How do you change it?
So, the real answer is I don't know. The real answer is that the path...
Eyal said that blockchain is the answer to break up big tech or maybe bring competition.
I rather not speak in breaking up. I think that I much prefer the complementary. You know, when in England the limited liability bill was passed, it didn't break up the state. The fact that the king is no longer the only one that can raise debt, but we can create those fictitious entities called companies with board of directors, etc., which we all take for granted, but 300 years ago would sound even crazier than what I'm telling you now, didn't break, it complemented the system. So I think that big tech is great, and it's doing a great job, but it is taking more and more over our civic services when it comes to money, when it comes to information. And so I think that we need to complement them. How would it happen? In one of two ways it always happens. Either in evolution or in revolution. It's either we learn together to adapt to this changing reality with policy, or when it all breaks, something else forms. How long it will take? Probably centuries. But I think it is becoming increasingly evident that there are several scopes in our lives, from information to the truth itself, to common ground that are being, that need an answer, and I think that blockchain answers many of the governance systems in those scopes.
So, what do you think about Libra?
So, being completely fair, Libra could be definitely positioned as Saga's competitor, and so I invite you to take anything I'm saying with a grain of salt. But I'll start by saying that.
Libra, the currency that Facebook tries.
Yeah. So I would make a very strong distinction between a network of payment and a currency. When it comes to a network of payment, Calibra makes perfect sense. Having a rich is the wallet, right? It's a payment layer, and it makes perfect sense because they have over 2 billion potential wallets. This chicken and egg question of why would I adopt a new payment system if no one uses it, and why would anyone use it if no merchant adopts it, is solved in the case of Facebook. And so I think that Calibra is very good news. I think it could potentially become the best payment network in the world. But
so
then,
in fact, just to elaborate to the people who don't know what it is, you believe that in a way when we open WhatsApp, we can use Calibra to transfer money in a click of a button.
Right, and I think that this can contribute greatly to financial inclusion. I think that lowering the criteria for being banked to whoever owns WhatsApp is overall a very positive thing. But when it comes to issuing the currency, there is a new question, which is not only a question of efficiency, but a question of legitimacy. When the central bank issues a currency, it is appointed by a government that is elected by citizens. And therefore, although quasi-independent, with a lot of degrees of separation, the central bank is accountable to the citizens of the country it issues the currency for. When the central bank decides to print more money, it is to serve those citizens. Whether it's right or wrong is a question of policy, but the accountability is there. When you take a corporate structure, the target of a corporate structure is to answer its shareholders, to generate profit to its shareholders. And when issuing a currency, you'll have a lot of currency holders that are not the sovereigns of the currency they hold, with the issuer of the currency being able, and I'm not saying anything specifically about Facebook. Again, I think that it is the systemic framework is more important than do we actually like Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos. It's of less importance. The simple truth is that by design, a corporation is here to generate profit to its shareholder. And now I want to ask a simple question. If we see Wall Street take a dive and the Wall Street 100 companies have a printing machine of money, would they print it or would they not? And I feel that we don't have a good enough answer for that, and anyhow, us who will be holding this currency would not have anything to say about it. And so I think that I would agree with Tim Cook saying that corporations have no business issuing money. I don't think that nation states can do it alone anymore because of this global economic sphere that nation states, again, by design, they are geographic. And so I think it is time for a new limited liability bill. We call it in Saga sovereign societies. New societies that are not geographically bound or nationality bound, where any participant can join and live at will, and where participants are sovereign, either by consensus over the blockchain or by electing experts to act on their behalf. But I think that we're in a sort of deadlock, right? We have citizens, they can choose, they can elect. The main mission of the nation state is to represent them, but it is geographically bound and nationality bound. And on the other end, we have the corporate that is living under the premise that you can always join and live at will, and therefore you have nothing to say. So if I want to change the Facebook protocol, I have nothing to say about it. I'm suggested that I can join and live at will, and that the free market would do its course. The only problem is that when it comes to contractual networks, this is not the case. The free market doesn't exist. If you suggest that if I want to impact Facebook, I should leave it, you should tell me where I'm living to. What is this big Facebook competitor that keeps Facebook on? Right. And if not, then WhatsApp, even better. So I think that it is really, it's bringing me back to the beginning of saying this room, policy making, legal work is more important than whether we are able to make a blockchain more scalable with 100 additional transactions per second.
But again, if you look at the people at office, at government, at the big tech, they will look at you and what do you suggest as an anarchist?
So I'm not suggesting anarchy at all.
You
Not at all.
suggest a
I'm
whole
suggesting a new scope of governance
and
to.
different approach, a whole new different approach.
So, you know, I agree that the base premise is that power never concedes power, right? And we shouldn't expect it to change. It's probably a human trait. What works in our favor, in all of our favors, is the prisoner dilemma. We are seeing countries that are trying to shut down this innovation because they're extremely afraid of it. Well, some of the fears are very real. And then in response, we're seeing other countries that are saying, be my guest. You're a global entity, and if they don't want you here, then come to us. We're seeing these new initiatives shopping for regulators, which is an altogether new thing. It's a new reality. And so I think that in the long run, you know, the gun has been put in the first act, and so it will shoot in the third. I want to believe that it would be a very smooth transition. I think that those countries, Singapore is one of them, for example, Britain is one of them, that are escorting these processes, facing with policy, with regulation, but are not trying to suffocate them, are the countries that will win.
So just for the end, how it will affect us, let's say it will happen, the fact of people in the room.
Us in terms of social impact, in terms of developing countries?
Yeah.
So I think that it can participate in transforming you from the lady borrowing sugar to being a part of the system. So I think that it is pretty clear that benevolence is not systemically reliant to run the world. When I hear of corporate responsibility, I hear relying on the decency and good heart of people in an incentive scheme that doesn't support it at all. There is nothing supporting a corporate to be responsible. When I hear of NGOs, they're usually lacking the sovereignty to be carrying out the missions they actually carry and should carry. And here the possibility to bring them under a contract, to bring in them under a very clear monetary logic, a very clear economical logic, I think is nothing short of revolutionary. I'd like to state another fact, which is that in many countries in the developed world, what is mostly to be developed is governance, is the mechanisms of decision making. We see a lot of countries of the so-called developed world that are way richer than this country in resources, in everything. Usually what's the main challenge is how to create governance structures that are functioning. I've participated in a magical event in Paris called Afrobyte, a bit short of a year ago, that the logo of which was Satoshi is African. And I think that a very interesting claim that arose in this dialogue is that blockchain can be the infrastructure that doesn't have to replace existing infrastructure. It can be new infrastructure. Just as much as in Spain and in Portugal, we've seen craze of industrial revolution because many of the infrastructure was missing and you didn't have legacy to face. You could simply implement new infrastructure. So I think that governance infrastructure is definitely relevant to the work that people in this room are doing.
I will open to questions from the audience.
Thank you very much. Following the last comments, what gives the governance and what gives the values to the blockchain, which basically there's no real supervision there, right? So this is my question.
What gives value?
No, values and governance because you said the solution, as was mentioned until now, talking about blockchain as something that brings us all together. with clear rules of the game, but what gives the governance here, and who makes sure that those values are implemented within the system?
So I'll give a simple answer, which I don't full-heartedly believe, because I think that blockchain doesn't answer everything. There are layers of human governance, and code is law, is not going to replace judges and lawyers and the rest of them. But the protocol provides the rule. When you set a protocol, you set a set of rules. And the beauty of it is that they are enforced by your actions. So let's give a simple example. When I press the like button on a post you've published, you get your like counter added by 1, right? If I send you a Bitcoin from my wallet to your wallet, then the protocol is decreasing my wallet with 1 Bitcoin and increasing your balance with 1. This is a protocol. This is a set of rules. Blockchain is just the infrastructure to create those rules. It's really a pen and paper of writing a constitution and then writing verdicts. It is simply being carried out by computers and with no central server that can change the constitution while we're living our lives. That's the only difference. Anything you can do with blockchain, you can do better with existing computational solutions, except for answering one question, which is who owns the server? Who owns the constitution of this service? The real innovation about blockchain is the fact that this constitution is replicated with whomever is using it, and it can only be changed if they're voting in consensus to change this constitution. So it's not different than anything we know now. If you want to create a new solution, you will have to create the protocol and the sets of rules. But when people are onboarding your solution, even if you are the creator of the protocol, changing them would be done only through consensus. And this allows to create it with no central entity to oversee it and to make sure that the protocol is impartial.